control a body and soul. Don't move too fast, people just take it.
So we were just talking back there, and you said you were talking about the challenge board. I know that about, I think at least like 60% of the challenges on the agency side were to do with talent. Did that surprise you?
No.
Not at all.
No.
So are we in a talent crisis officially?
I don't like to use the word crisis because I think it kind of says you're not in control at all. I think there's a lot of dynamics going on in all industries on talent. So the world has changed pretty dramatically in terms of the talent management space, and so I think all companies are dealing with how do we manage our talent in this new world order. And then if you take our industry, we have a lot of dynamic change going on as well. So we're kind of, at this intersection of talent management is being handled much differently anyway, and then we have a lot of dynamic change going on. So how do we, get in control of that, and how do we focus on that, I think is more of the question than it being a crisis.
And I've noticed that you are not from the agency world. You
Right.
came over to Havas from a completely different industry. So I think you have a viewpoint about all industries are going through this talent management sort of upheaval.
Sure.
Why are they going through that, and sort of what's actually happening?
Well, I think the world has become much more transparent, much more interconnected. Everybody's, friends on Facebook with people from work, and with that, and with kind of the millennial generation, which by 2020 will be 75% of our workforce. You've had like this shift in terms of expectation and what people want out of their work environment and the type of organization they want to work with. So I think what people are looking for is, they want to work with an organization that first of all has some kind of mission or vision. So if that's not clearly stated, you automatically put yourself at risk, because people don't want to show up every day and not know kind of where we're going. The work has to be meaningful. I think particularly the millennial generation, they want to have lots of different types of opportunities. So they don't want to stay in the same job for 3 years. They want to be able to move around. They have to trust the leadership. They have to know that the leadership is investing in the organization. So I think what was once kind of verticals, they've all become very interconnected. And the world of, how do you engage your employees is a very transparent one. The employer is no longer in control of their employer brand. Your employees are, because of this world of transparency.
Right.
So if your employees aren't on their social networks talking about how they love to work at your organization or your agency, you're going to have a more difficult time.
Are you friends with Andrew Bennett on Facebook?
I am.
Okay.
He was away for the weekend. He had a long weekend with his wife.
Well, what do you do?
But I will tell you the thing about that, I had to push myself to open up my Facebook for like all the work people. I was kind of like, oh, it's just really, it's my family, my close friends.
Did you scrub your profile? Like, were you like,
No.
none of these people can see my
No,
embarrassing...
I was more worried about my 80-year-old mother, who just went on the Facebook, which was the original term, and sometimes the things she makes comments on, and I was like, but I just had to kind of lean into that and say, that's my world, and isn't it great that my 80-year-old mother is on the Facebook?
Well, so what do you think of Facebook for work then? I mean, so Facebook's introduced this new product that's going to be for offices. I mean, is that the kind of transparency we're talking about? Because that's still, it's a very theatrical transparency, I think. Like, this is Facebook for work, and this is Facebook for Patty at home.
No, I mean, I think people want to know kind of the authentic you. And sure, you can have a separate account if you want, but I think people will understand that it's not really kind of the real you showing up every day, so to speak. So I think the expectation now is, there's kind of a openness, and it's a world where, from a talent management perspective, you have to deal with that openness. You can't fight it.
Yeah. How do you, I mean, a lot of people, I think, when you start talking about whatever problems the agency industry is having when it comes to talent, immediately, go to compensation as the culprit.
Right.
And I know that you don't think compensation is the thing that's going to be the solve for this. It's not about raise salaries and nobody's going to leave to Facebook anymore.
I mean, if you look at any meaningful studies that are done around engagement, it's never number one on the list. People want to have a meaningful experience at work. They want to be challenged. They want to grow. They want to develop. Compensation is, it's a component of that, but it's not typically the main motivator. I will say, I think we have a bit of a crisis, if you will, at the entry level. And I think we have to get much smarter about, kind of coming up to at least the median, competitive levels if we want to get the best talent out of school. Because for them, some of them can't do what they're passionate about. They might want to enter the industry, but just the basics of being able to live,
right.
or the entry-level salaries.
So why can't we raise them? Why can't you just look around your entry level and say raise everybody by 5 or 10,000 and just move everybody up a level? I mean, what's stopping you?
So the complexity is there's a knock-on effect. So you have the people that are in year 2, you have the people that are in year 3. So you really have to address it holistically, because if you want to take an entry-level person in and bring them in now at a higher salary than somebody that's already invested a year with you, you have to be able to kind of have that dialogue. So there's ways to do it, but it has to be, it's kind of a methodical approach to it in terms of how do we get that whole, kind of up-and-coming level of leaders, moved up from a salary perspective.
Are you guys currently going through that methodical evaluation?
Yes.
So how is it going? What are the obstacles you're running into? Other than the one you just spoke about?
Well, I think it's the, typical with the CFO, you have to kind of get them kind of to switch their head game out of just the numbers and into this is an investment for the future. And I think there's some creative ways you can look at it as well. So, I think the concept of when you're bringing an entry-level person in, perhaps kind of saying, we're going to, as long as you're performing at the level you need to, here's the progression. We're going to guarantee the compensation progression. So they're not kind of waiting around. And, sometimes in the agency environment, it's not, a set process or formula. And, people are kind of left wondering, when is the next increase going to come? How is that going to happen? And I think it takes some of the mystery out of that, and it just puts the transparency on the table.
Yeah. One of the other things that's sort of a big trend is, agencies are competing, obviously, with, like we've talked about, Google and Facebook, but they're also increasingly competing with a drive that says, I don't want to work for anybody. I want to go freelance. And freelancers make a lot of money. So it also is a solve for the compensation issues we were discussing. Obviously, it's not an easy life, but how do you, that creates a lot of staffing challenges for agencies, this increasing freelance economy. How do you deal with that?
So it's actually, if you go outside our industry, it's actually a huge trend. So a recent study said, of chief HR officers said 83% of them expect to have more part-time, contingent, freelance, contract employees in the coming year. So it's actually a pretty significant trend and model shift. Some of it is driven by a generation that wants to have the flexibility to go dive in and do an assignment for a couple months and then go travel for a couple months. It's something that you can't fight it. It's actually, happening, and it's going to be bigger. So you have to figure out how you make it work, because you do have people coming in and out of your workforce. So from a talent management perspective, you really have to kind of embrace them and have an approach to how you keep them informed, how they can play on the teams, even though they may be coming in and out. And it's, I think there's other things, if you think about the model of how our contracts with our clients happen, there's also some things you could be doing smarter on the front end to avoid sometimes the need to have to bring in a certain skill because it doesn't exist.
It's just a question of planning ahead in scope.
Exactly, and I think that's a big challenge right now, because the types of skills that we're finding that you need, or when you have a good idea about something you want to do with a client and you don't have that skill set, you know, I think there's just this opportunity in terms of how the client contracts are getting structured to allow for more flexibility. There's still a little bit of kind of the old school approach with some clients where you're kind of locked into, here's the certain set of headcount, and then this great idea comes along and you're kind of going, well, I don't have that person on there, and then if I pull somebody from over here, how am I going to build them back? And, you know, I think we're going to have to push a lot more with our clients that to do great work with them, there's got to be a little more flexibility about the types of talent we can bring in and out to deliver that work.
And that's just a question of educating clients, or is it harder than that? Is it just about letting them know?
I think it's, you know, it's got to kind of start at the beginning of the relationship if it's a pitch environment, and in terms of what's our philosophy around how we, you know, bring the talent onto your team, how we're going to staff your team. And for existing clients, I think you always want to be in a conversation with them around what's going on with talent in your organization. You want to let them know if you've got some great new talent you've brought in who might be able to somehow benefit them. And I think that's a dialogue. Sometimes, you know, it gets, with certain clients, things get, you know, very kind of tight and close with just the people that are working on it, and you have to kind of make sure those dialogues are happening so it opens up the opportunity for other skill sets.
Do you think that the point at which fees are being driven down in this, like, this environment of procurement and this environment of clients just caring about the money, that it's increasingly sort of, it's just turning into this commoditized business, and that eventually has its effects on talent, because then you, again, can't pay your people, or you can't bring on the people you need? I mean, is there a fix for that?
You know, I think there's just a lot of dynamics going on, and if you're not in the dialogue around them, if you're just kind of accepting that when the client comes in and says, you know, you now have to work with purchasing and et cetera, you know, I do believe clients still want great work, and it's our responsibility to kind of hold on to that conversation and that dialogue in terms of the talent that's going to be required to do that, and or if there's a change in terms of direction with the client, you know, educating them on, you know, I know you want to become more digital, so here's how things are going to shift and change. I think, you know, we have to be in that active dialogue. You can't expect that they're just going to understand, and you can't just accept when they come to you and say,
it's time to fight back.
I wouldn't say fight, but I think, you know, the whole topic of talent, if it's not on the table with your client and you're not educating them on both what's going on in your agency and what might be needed for their particular work, you're going to fight the bureaucracy battle then.
Right.
Whereas if you're in that open dialogue, at least maybe you meet halfway. You might not get everything you're looking for, but you might get a little bit of flexibility in approach.
Let's talk a little bit about internal culture, because, again, one of those words that gets thrown around a lot, but sometimes doesn't really have meaning. I mean, how do you go about creating a culture, and what is the best way to communicate what that culture is to your employees, and most importantly, to prospective employees?
Sure. So, you know, I think it's really important first that your company, your agency, your organization have a clear vision. If your purpose isn't clear, it's really hard to then have a culture that kind of,
so give me an example of what's your purpose at Haas.
Well, we have meaningful connections. So we're in the process of now having, we're in a whole employee branding exercise, because when I came in and kind of looked across all our LinkedIn sites and looked across our websites, it was very different all over the world. And that's okay. It's all right to have the diversity of, you know, cultures and whatnot. But there was no set commitment that we were making to our employees who are with us and employees coming in. So we have work that'll be coming out in a couple months that is focused on kind of the stake in the ground. And the thing that's beautiful about it is, you know, we're making this statement, and now all the leaders have to walk the talk and live it every day. because we're actually saying this is our commitment, and we may not be there at, on every aspect of it yet. Some of it we may have to work towards. But it kind of holds everybody accountable, and then it also is a very clear message for prospective employees, because you're able to say, here's the things we stand for, here's what we're working on, and then I would say the other thing that's really essential is really the continuing opportunity to reach out and engage your employees in some type of employee survey.
Okay. How often?
At least annually. I mean, I think now, there's lots of opportunity to do interesting pulse surveys, real quick stuff. I'd love to see a lot of that move to mobile. That to me would be the easiest way and the quickest way to get reads on your employees. We use data for everything with our clients. So if you don't have good data on how your employees are thinking and feeling, you're kind of guessing. And when I came in, there hadn't been a survey done in a number of years. And I said, we really need to do it. And we partnered with an external organization so that we'd also have benchmark data. And it was really insightful to the leaders. When you sit
what was
down,
the most surprising thing that came out of it? Can you remember?
That there's so much low-hanging fruit, like things that are very easy to do, that are low cost, basic recognition, having, employees want to have dialogues with the leaders of their agency, so doing roundtables. We had a bunch of the leaders in our New York office kind of get into like a competition, and they were having these breakfast roundtables, and somebody brought the waffle machine in and was making waffles, somebody else did mimosas, And the employees liked that because they got to see and spend time, and these things don't cost any money.
How were the waffles?
I think the mimosa party was more well liked. But there's just the basic motivators that people want each and every day when they come in. And you spend a lot of time at work. So you want to know the people you work with. You want to know what they stand for. You want to feel motivated around the work you're on. And if you don't ask, you're guessing.
Do you think agencies, you mentioned sort of we use all this data with clients, and then you're not using that when it comes to figuring out what your employees want, and that should be fixed. And that kind of delves into a bigger problem. And I think it was Andrew actually who said, agencies have shoemaker's son syndrome. Agencies don't do a good job of marketing themselves as well as they do a good job of marketing their clients' products. It's sort of a bigger branding issue. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think, coming from the outside in, I would say the way the agency world connects with each other, and people are always pipelining. So I'll say the front end of kind of the talent scenario was fascinating to me, because that doesn't happen in a lot of industries. And it's actually great that people are always kind of talking, and they're looking at talent here and there and kind of keeping their eye on. They might have people they're in dialogues with that they don't have a role for yet, that they're just going to kind of keep that relationship going. That once they get in, it's kind of the nurturing piece, and the how do people get feedback? How do they know what their career path is? That whole talent management piece is the one that I think it kind of falls off a cliff, and that's really where the time needs to be invested, because that's what employees are saying is so important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple minutes for questions. There are mics if anybody has one. Okay. No questions. All right. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Shirley.